Burton are some of the finest gardens anywhere in the world. For me, it's about getting in amongst the wonderful plants that flourish in this country and sharing the passion of the people who tend them. However, there is another way to enjoy a garden. And that's to get up above it. I love ballooning because you get to see the world below in a whole new light. From up here you get a real sense of how the garden sits in the landscape, how the terrain and the climate has shaped it. And I want you to share that experience with me. This is a day that promises wonderful flying weather and a chance to see one of Britain's most picturesque counties. Today we're in Cumbria, characterised with its magnificent mountains and sparkling lakes. The Lake District, with over 900 square miles of outstanding beauty, has Scafell Pike as its highest peak and Windermere as its longest lake. Cumbria is England's most northwesterly county. Air blowing in from the Irish Sea and England's highest mountains means that it has some of the highest rainfall in the country. And it's no stranger to water because it's surrounded by spectacular lakes and over 200 fell tops. And Cumbria has got some rather magnificent gardens. And I discover that one of them has the power to put a spring in a man's step.
You put your profile down, you know.
Yeah.
And up came Jean with a 91% match. I'm sure it's now up to 100% because she was a vegetarian then, but she isn't now. Things have changed a bit. But it's all because you come here, you see. Everything works when you come here.
And I'll meet the wonderful volunteers whose dedication has transformed the gardens that were left to the people of Cumbria.
Someone made me laugh and said, it must be very competitive, people in different beds. I said, it's not competitive at all. If the standard's high, it's because we don't want to let the side down.
And they don't do things by halves up here. We'll learn about raw materials used by ingenious engineers to create these mighty structures. And we'll find out about the legacy left by one of our favourite children's authors.
At the end of her life, Beatrix had amassed 14 farms and over 4,000 acres of countryside, and this was an amazing legacy to leave to the nation.
The rainfall might be challenging to gardeners, but this county is blessed with some truly inspiring gardens, like this one, glorious Levens Hall. The 8 acres of Levens Hall lie 20 miles from the coast in Cumbria's South Lakeland. From in the air you can see Levens Hall sitting as it has for over 3 centuries. It's moved on, but it's still the same garden as it was when it was created, but still the level of horticulture that's very exciting. There have been families living at Levens Hall since the 13th century, but the house as we see it now was created in 1580, and the gardens were laid out at the end of the 17th century. As you approach from the south, you come to a tree-shaded walk called the Wilderness, and then you're into the Fountain Garden. It was reinstated in 1994, but it's based on the original 1690 design. Opposite is the grassy square of the bowling green, where 18th century gentlemen did indeed play bowls, and the game is still played on it today. Emanating out of the centre of this southern part of the garden is the Grand Beech Hedge. It's 500 feet long and offers a quiet oasis of green calm amongst the colourful and busy borders. To the east of the house lies what is perhaps Levens Hall Garden's most exuberant and playful feature, the Topiary Garden. Those magnificent topiary pieces dominating that garden, making it one of the most wildest, zappiest gardens in the country. And for me, it's very, very exciting. Levens Hall, a magical place where you pass through a doorway and the eruption of fun. It's like Alice in Wonderland, the Mad Hatter's Tea Party. Great shapes, great fun, great horticulture, all in one garden. Gardeners at Levens Hall have had so much fun working here, they hardly ever leave. In over 300 years, there's only ever been 10 head gardeners, and the latest, Chris Crowder, has been here for nearly 3 decades. He's hard at work in the orchard. Hi, Chris.
Oh, hello.
Nice to see you.
Hi.
Hi, what you up to?
Planting some bulbs today.
OK, what you putting?
Well, underneath all these fruit trees in this orchard, we've got tulips.
Right, can I give you a hand?
Yeah, please. We put the last lot in about 10 years ago, and what with voles, and we get loads of pheasants in the winter digging them up and eating them, so
Right.
every decade or so it's time to top them up a little. Apple dawn in this case, a bright red. Quite a vigorous one, which it needs to be to keep up with growing in this grass.
So why are you putting in tulips? I would have thought, you know, nice daffs.
The daffs in drifts look nice in an orchard or a wilder area, but here it's quite formal. It's in the centre of the garden, so for formal effect we thought tulips would be the business. It's quite a hit through here when it's in flowering stage in about May time.
Levens has a tradition of planting tulips in this formal way, and these colourful flowers have a fascinating history. Originally, the tulip was a wild flower growing across the Middle East and Central Asia. Its cultivation began over 1,000 years ago in Persia and Turkey. In the 16th century, they were introduced into the Netherlands and became all the rage. Such was the demand that the roaring trading bulls offered great financial rewards. This period became known as Tulip Mania. In 1635, one bulb sold for 2,500 florins, more than 16 times the average yearly salary. At today's wage levels, that would equate to nearly £400,000. It wasn't to last. The market crashed suddenly in 1637, leaving some investors penniless. Despite this, tulips never lost their popularity. With thousands of varieties in swathes of glorious colour, they're a real favourite. They're hardy and easy to grow. They work well in pots and can provide a real focal point in a garden. Plant them in November and enjoy them when their brilliantly coloured blooms burst forth in the spring. So how did you get into gardening?
I've loved it since I was a lad. I used to help out with my dad's allotment when I was small, still at school. So the obvious thing was leaving as soon as I possibly could and getting a job with the local parks department.
So what's your vision for the garden? How are you going to take it forward?
Well, we do. We move with it every year as much as we can. It's just to make it the best garden we possibly can with the amount of people we've got to do it. It's a struggle, but we do develop a new piece every year within the old framework. And it's a series of pictures. That's how I sort of lay out the garden or in my mind or when we design new areas. It divides up into lovely compartments, if you like. There's plenty of hedges through the garden, so it's keeping each bit separate and different than the rest and being a wow at every turn.
Yeah, because I tend to think of it as, you know, you've got the topiary, you've got the orchard, you've got the fountain garden, you've got the hedges, you've got the veg. It's a great sense of adventure wandering through.
Yeah, it's a series of wows or photo opportunities or big hits, lead one to the next, yeah. That's how we're going.
Well, it strikes me that you're doing all right.
Oh, thank you, thank you.
Do you have a favourite bit of the garden?
Oh, I don't know whether I do, actually. I like the bit that has to be right, of course, is I live in the garden, the gardener's house, so the view out our kitchen window has to be right.
Oh.
But after that, it's different areas come peak at different times, so right through from Easter through to October.
So what's the biggest job you have to do?
Well, in this place, it's topiary and hedges. We seem to have miles of it, or hundreds of them, and it keeps us busy for about 6 months of the year, starting just round about now.
I think I want to come and have a look and see what you're up to.
We'll finish this job later.
Yeah.
But let's go and have a look at the rest of the garden.
The Topi Garden, Levens Hall, is the oldest part of the formal gardens. Some of the trees are 300 years old,
but little has changed since they were planted and trained into shapes in the 1690s.
Time to trim a bit of top topiary then.
Oh, well, if you show me how to do it and I don't make a botch up.
Well, I'm hoping that won't be the result. And in a way, it's just very similar to doing a haircut. It's grown over the year,
Yeah.
and it's time to take all that growth off. Certainly on a shape that's already established. We can see the line,
Yes.
and it's a question of slowly looking at it and trimming it back down to that line.
Yeah, well, you can do the top bit.
I'll bring my ladder out later, yes.
So it's just following the line.
Snipping them round. And my other top tip really is the one we've always used, is have a squirter with us, because the shears gum up as you use them, and after a while they're too sticky to move, or the blades are pressed apart and they're just not giving that sharp finish. It's very satisfying.
It's
Like any
satisfying.
handcrafting, sculpting or painting, I suppose.
But how many pieces have you got?
Over 100. This one's a new one, actually. We've added to the burden of future generations by putting a few in. It's about 15 years old, that's all, and we plant them as tiny little hedging plants and then start to grow them up and out from there.
Right.
And you can change the shape over time. They would have all started as cones in the early days.
When did topiary, start, and how did it start, and where did it start from?
It goes back to Roman times. Back in ancient Rome it was box, and there's actually documents and letters from those times documenting fleets of ships and hunting scenes.
Right.
And topiary, the word comes from topiarius, I think,
Yeah.
which was Latin for the garden slave.
Right.
And the garden slave would have done all this.
Well, that's what we are now.
Yeah, so it has got a long, long history. It spread from Italy across France. The grand gardens would have had clip forms, and it ended up in England. The high time for this fashion was in the 1690s, just when this garden was being set up.
Levens was the height of fashion, with its green sculptures clipped into bold silhouettes. It, and many gardens like it at the time, were the place to be seen. The Dutch style was all the rage, with clipped greens set in a pattern of formal box-edged beds. But fashions change, and by the 1730s, many of these beautifully manicured yew and box gardens were ripped out to make way for the new trend of natural landscaping. Capability Brown had a lot to answer for, as open parkland became the next big thing. Topiary was not lost completely. The 1830s saw a revival as people decided landscape had become old hat. The Victorians moved topiary on, as they did so many aspects of garden design and machinery, and so it continued to thrive. We British are known for our eccentricity and eagerness to give things a try, with guides available showing what shapes could be achieved. Anything was possible, though some efforts were more successful than others. Levens survived, and I'm hoping my efforts don't scupper things.
So what sort of tools did they use in the past?
Well, we assumed there was something like the shears we're using today.
Right.
That would have been the way, or possibly for rougher hedges it might even have been a sickle just across the surface like that.
Okay.
Some sort of sharp blade. But we've now got the electric and the petrol ones to help us on our way. And of course the access equipment, the higher they get, we now use scaffolding. It was ladders, but
Right.
scaffolding and hydraulic lifts are the top ones.
Right, so cherry pickers,
Yeah,
things
that's
like
the way,
that.
yeah. There's a great view from up there sometimes.
I bet, yes, yeah.
And of course the other handy tool we've got sometimes is a cane. And they're quite handy if you really want a flat edge. You can, if your cane's straight anyway, you can hold it against a flat edge and just eye it up and see that you're going in the right direction.
Yeah.
But also at the end we like to give it a good flick off. Gets rid of all those prunings and clippings that'll turn brown later. Also it flicks up the odd thing that'll,
That you'd
if
left.
you don't do it now, it'll blow out in a month's time and haunt you for the rest of the year. So it just shows us the last bits to clip off.
So how long does it take you, and how many people are involved?
Well, there's 4 of us working the gardens, but not all of us are on the hedges all the time. But certainly 2 people for the best part of 6 months almost.
Right.
It's from now till Christmas to do all the topiary and get that part of the garden put to bed, and what with hedges and stuff, it can drag on a little. We're happy to start, but we're even happier to finish at the end of the season.
I bet, yeah. And how quickly do you allow your apprentices to let rip?
And it's a slow thing. We let them go on the rounder things, round the back first, and if they can master the art of doing amorphous blob-like shapes, we'll start them on a flat bit of hedge that nobody will see. And if that goes well, they're on and away on the rest of the topiary. Slowly, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the more you do, the more you get into it.
Well, I think that's not a bad job, actually. I think together we make a good team. Shall we go and have a brew?
I think it's well deserved, yes. Excellent.
Gardening at this level is a painstaking process. It takes time, but the simple act of growing something can not only soothe a troubled mind, it can also help heal it. And that's exactly what's happening here at Growing Well. Since 2004, a crop share scheme has been run from this 6-acre farm outside Kendal, and it provides local families with a weekly supply of seasonal vegetables.
OK, let's see if we can get these back in one piece.
Many of the local volunteers who work on the farm have suffered mental health problems, but have found gardening an important part of their recovery. Claire Louise Chapman at Growing Well explains.
The thing about poor mental health is that many people don't feel valued. When you're feeling very low, it's all around that sense of worth and why am I here?
This project offers a supportive environment for people looking to find a way through their problems.
You come in and you work with us, you feel a valued part of the team. Growing is a continuous process, so that ability to plant a seed and several months later harvest from that seed gives an amazing sense of continuity. And the growing process gives a reason to get out of bed and come and see what you've done and how that is growing, and it helps you grow within yourself as well.
Kevin has been coming here for a year. After his wife died, leaving him with their 4 children to bring up, he struggled to cope. Working in this way has helped him to feel positive about life again.
Working here on a daily basis, it has shown me light at the end of a tunnel. It's the fresh air. There's a good bunch of people here you can have a chat with. If you've got a problem, you can speak to people. It keeps my mind occupied.
Growing Well's a very special community, so it's not just the work, it's the fact that you're coming to us and you're being part of our community.
Each day is different. You meet lots of different people with lots of different issues. You know, you could talk to each other about it and ask them how they're feeling that day, and some people like their own space, some people like to work on their own.
We know that people have very strong friendships that are formed at Growing Well. And we all take breaks together, we all eat together, and that social inclusion is a really important aspect.
Mike was a teacher for many years, but began to find the workload too much of a strain. He wanted to make a change, but didn't know which direction to take.
I started off coming because I really wasn't well. I was so poorly, I wasn't able to make any decisions. And coming to Growing Well helped me with that. And I felt rewarded for coming and doing something which was completely different. And as a result of that, I was able to make a decision about my teaching career and to end it because it wasn't going to get any better. And that's what I did.
It's not just volunteers who benefit from working at Growing Well.
It's really lovely working at Growing Well because you see change in people. You see people who start and just really lack that confidence. Even seeing people being able to sit and have a cup of tea and have a conversation with somebody else is brilliant.
For Kevin and Mike, it's fair to say that this project has been a lifeline.
It gives me a source of something to do. It keeps me going.
I'm not quite sure where I would be without Growing Well.
I've always believed that gardens are a balm for the soul. Even just walking amongst the glorious displays is a real tonic. And I'm not the only one. Lakeland lad Len Hayton has been inspired by Levens Hall for nearly 20 years.
I moved to Levens in 1997, actually.
Right, OK.
With my wife Joy. And we used to come here for lunch, and we used to come into the garden because it's lovely, really. And when she was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, my niece suggested that we should have some photographs taken in the garden
Right.
at that time. That was a very... it was a,
That obviously meant a lot to you.
it did.
An awful lot
It
to
did
you.
indeed. And it has done ever since. After she died, I used to come here and I felt welcome.
Yeah.
I always felt welcome. And when you come into this garden, it's as if you've stepped off the world into heaven.
Right.
It's like coming through the gate into heaven. It's absolutely lovely.
And what do you mean by that?
You leave the mundane world, as it were, and all the problems outside, and you come in here and there's peace and there's quiet. Gives me a feeling of tranquility and at the same time inspiration.
Len's late wife Joy had worried about him being lonely, so after 2.5 years as a widower, he tried his hand at internet dating.
You put your profile down, you know,
Yeah.
and up came Jean with a 91% match.
Hey.
And by God, that's been true. And I'll tell you, the last 4 years have been bliss. I'm sure it's now up to 100% because she was a vegetarian then, but she isn't now. Things have changed a bit. But it's all because you come here, you see. Everything works when you come here. Jean is just as happy here as Joy and I were happy here.
And you
It's
see,
lovely.
gardens are about cultivation.
Yeah,
It's not just cultivating plants, it's cultivating people.
probably right about that. It certainly helped me through illness and everything. And this garden has had a lot to do with it.
It's wonderful to hear about the way this magnificent garden has helped Len through darker days. Levens Hall is a special place for me too, and I'd like to leave something behind as a thanks for all the magic. Local artist Libby Edmondson has been coming to Levens Hall for years, but she first caught a tantalising glimpse of the garden during family holidays to the Lake District.
We used to pass Levens Hall. I could see this wonderful place behind a very big wall. I could see the topiary peeping over the top, which was a bit enticing. So I always promised myself that I would someday go in and have a proper look at it, which I did as soon as we moved here, and wow.
Like me, Libby thinks the garden is a veritable wonderland.
It was like being Alice. You walk in a small gateway and you have this vista of strange shapes and trees you haven't seen before. I could see some of those topiaries getting up and having a little dance round the lawn when nobody was looking, because a lot of them have skirts.
The garden has clearly left a lasting impression.
It's influenced my art because it has this fantasy feeling. It just makes me feel good.
The beauty and grandeur of glorious Lakeland has appealed to artists throughout history. Author William Wordsworth and painters J.M.W. Turner and Edward Burne-Jones all found inspiration here. But there's one very famous devotee of this landscape, one who dedicated much of her life and fortune to preserving it for generations to come. Beatrix Potter is perhaps the 20th century's most adored children's writer, and her tales of Peter Rabbit and other charming characters have enchanted children for over 100 years. But she has another legacy, and it's this: mile after wonderful mile of stunning Lake District scenery. Liz McFarlane is house manager at Hilltop, Beatrix Potter's Lakeland property.
Beatrix Potter first stayed in this area when she was 16. Her family came to the Lake District on holiday, and it was during these long summer holidays that she was able to enjoy all that the Lake District had to offer. What Beatrix really loved about this landscape was the freedom that it gave her and what it provided her with in terms of inspiration. So she was able to draw the landscape, she was able to study the wildlife, the flora, the fungi, collect fossils, and everything, of course, she would commit to paper, drawing, painting and sketching.
It was on this holiday that Potter met a man who was to have a profound effect on her life and on the British countryside.
When she was just 16, Beatrix met Canon Rawnsley, who was one of the 3 founders of the National Trust, and he really instilled in her that need to protect the way of life here, the fact that that way of life was in danger and something needed to be done in order to protect the farming and the income that was being generated from the land.
Canon Rawnsley's views on preserving the natural beauty of the Lake District had a lasting effect on Potter. He campaigned against the construction of roads over the lakeland passes and promoted signposted footpaths. He was also the first published author she'd ever met, and later encouraged her to publish her first book. She, of course, became a literary sensation.
Well, with the money from the first 4 little books, Beatrix was able to purchase Hilltop, the farm here, and that was the first of many land purchases and farms in this area.
Potter bought Hilltop in 1905, and she used it and the surrounding countryside as inspiration for many of her subsequent books. But she was also becoming much more focused on her life as a countrywoman. She wanted to preserve the old ways of life of the fell farmers and protect the landscape.
The continued success of the little books enabled Beatrix to carry on buying land and farms, and when she married a local solicitor, William Heelis, at the age of 47, she was really concentrating on her farming, and the books were a means to an end. They were giving her the means to buy these farms and landscape.
As a far-sighted benefactor, Potter worked to protect the vulnerable landscape. When she died in 1943, she bequeathed to the nation all the farms and farmland she'd acquired.
At the end of her life, Beatrix had amassed 14 farms and over 4,000 acres of countryside, and this was an amazing legacy to leave to the National Trust for the benefit of the nation.
Beatrix Potter was so captivated by this landscape that she wanted to pass on what she'd preserved so others could enjoy the beauty of her lakeland farms. And she wasn't the only one who was generous. My next port of call was also left to the people of the area.
15 miles north of Levens Hall, on the hillside over there, is another very spectacular Cumbrian garden, Holehird, and it's managed and run by volunteers, showing just what can be achieved in the harsh landscapes of the lakes.
Set in a mountainous spot high above the northern end of Lake Windermere, Holehird Gardens covers 17 acres. The volunteers here are custodians of a garden that's expanded since they took it on. At the heart is the wall garden. Once a kitchen garden for the original grand house, its plantings was mapped out in the 1980s to ensure that all sides, north, east, south and west, are used to best effect. The island beds in the centre provide year-round colour. Presiding over it is the fell side, a wooded hill with rockeries and specimen trees. One of Holeherd's 6 greenhouses is given over to alpine plants, whose shoots need protection from Cumbria's wet weather. Tumbling down the hillside is the cascade, and then the terrace. The original owners of Holehird established the gardens here in the late 19th century. They flourished until the end of the Second World War, but after that it became too expensive to maintain them, and for nearly 25 years the garden laid abandoned and unloved. Since the late 1960s, a growing band of local volunteers has set about reclaiming this gem of a garden. Sheila Newman is one of their number.
Hello Sheila, how are you?
Oh, hello, Christine. Good to see you back in Holehird again.
Great to be here. What are you up to?
Well, You know how keen we are on our alpines here at Holehird?
Yeah.
Well, there's this bit that's been a bit neglected of late.
Right.
This seems to have got a bit too big, Christine. It's taking over the whole area, and I think at least some of it should go.
Sheila's working with Tufa. This rock is formed as lime-rich water evaporates, leaving behind a soft and porous calcium-rich limestone. It's ideal for growing lime-loving plants. It's light and easy to handle, and it absorbs and holds water. When plants are grown in Tufa, they get a slow and steady release of moisture. A lot of people don't realise that a Tufa garden is light, so you can have this on places like balconies.
Right.
If you want a rock garden in the sky, you can.
What a good idea.
The other thing that people say is, I've only got a courtyard, I've no soil at all. It doesn't flipping well matter. Get yourself a couple of lumps of Tufa, plant it up, and you've got a garden. It's fantastic stuff, it's lovely.
I don't know what you think, but it looks to me as if it could do with the odd new cushion plant to revitalise it.
I think you've got a saxy, so...
Yeah, that looks rather a nice one, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. Well, that could go in there, and then it will grow over that rock, and I think that would be quite nice, but we'll need to make a hole. So have you got a hammer and something I can gouge this out with?
And we've got a little spatula.
Now, I don't know how you do this, but I tend to make the hole but keep the Tufa dust.
Right.
So have you got something like a cup or something like that we can knock the old Tufa dust into?
Yeah.
So if you can sort of, when I start getting stuff out...
Is that so that it sort of weans it into the space a bit?
There's two schools of thought involved with this. There's the school of thought that says you take out a hole around about 2 inches deep and the right same diameter, and then you put in a gritty soil mixture.
Right.
And then there's the school of thought that I tend to run with, that you take the Tufa out and you put the Tufa back.
Right.
Now, the reason for that is, in my opinion, if you use a soil mixture, you've got a different air concentration in the soil than you have in the Tufa.
Right.
And the plant can put its roots round the soil and never goes into the Tufa. So it can, it's pot bound and the plants can dry out. Whereas if you put back what you've taken out, the air is at the same concentration, the plant establishes much quicker, and it runs into the patent rock.
Jolly good tip, actually. I didn't know that.
I mean, the other thing that's fascinating about this stuff is that you can buy it from nurseries. But when you buy it from nurseries, it's often sold outside. And as you know, this is actually absorbent.
Yeah, it's porous.
It's porous.
Yes.
So when you buy it from outside, it contains water.
Yes.
It's sold by weight. So you're buying a lot of water.
Pays them to store it outside, really, doesn't it?
Well, some nurseries are more scrupulous than others, but occasionally you'll find it's quite wet. And you're paying, literally, just for water. If you go to an aquatic centre, it's stored inside. And it's dry, so you get more for your dosh. And being a tight northerner, you can guess where I go. So what made you come to Holehird?
Well, about 20 years ago, I retired early because I was caring for my mother, and we just moved into a house with a much bigger garden. So I thought I needed some advice on what to do, and a friend told me that they were running an RHS course up at Holehird.
All right.
And for 18 months I did this really rather good RHS course. And then I realised there was actually a garden here and you could volunteer at it. I decided I would come and be a garden here too.
Wow!
And it's kept me learning.
Now then, I'm going to knock this out, but what I do is I'll take all this off. If you wash this off, so you've just got a little bit of soil in there, but predominantly roots.
Right.
And then I'm going to put this Tufa dust back.
Right.
So that it's at the same consistency as that Tufa.
And you wouldn't add anything else, Christine,
No,
to that?
I don't. No. And that will establish, and in 3 years' time, you'll have a beautiful mat that creeps over there and flowers, and it will just literally mould itself into rock. We planted a saxifraga, this one with a cushion-like habit, but there are thousands of different alpines. True alpines originate from high-altitude regions above the tree line, where there's good drainage and cold, dry winters with high light levels. In the wild, alpines spend their winters dormant. They remain dry and protected from extreme temperatures and cold winds by being covered with a blanket of snow. The vast majority of plants sold as alpines are easy to grow in most gardens and need only the minimum of care. There are even drought-busting species. Those from southern Europe are ideal to plant if our summers are getting drier and we face hosepipe bans. And the beauty of alpines is that you can travel the world without leaving your own garden.
So Sheila, what makes coming to Holehird so special for you?
I think as much as anything else, it's the people.
Right.
It can be quite solitary if you're gardening on your own. Maybe the neighbours are at work, maybe you're in a country garden, you don't see anybody. But if you come here, you're gardening as a team. And also, there's a sense here of ownership with the beds. We get together either as individuals or groups and look after our own bit of the garden.
Right.
And we don't just deadhead and weed.
Yeah.
We actually choose what we plant. We have a budget where we can go out and buy our own plants.
Right.
And the only consideration is that don't plant a tree or take one down without conferring with somebody else, because that could impact on somebody else's bed. But there's a lot of sense of ownership, so I think that builds a good spirit that you belong to the place, really.
And what's fascinating is that though you have this magical garden, you've got an emphasis on labelling, but it's not in your face, is it?
Although we're not officially a botanical garden, we actually do quite like to have our plants labelled, and we do find most of our visitors really appreciate that.
But do you know one of the things that I appreciate so much in this garden is the level of expertise. And this is a garden that is looked after and cared for with love.
Oh, yes.
And it's love from gardeners that have not trained but have spent their life in the University of Gardening and Life. And it's very, very special. And it's always impressive. But the one thing I always say, and particularly when I'm bringing groups, is look at the standard they maintain. And it's awesome, and it's very, very impressive, and it's a phenomenal credit to you all. So just keep doing it, because you're doing it right.
Thank you very much. You know, someone made me laugh, a visitor that came round the garden and said, it must be very competitive, people in different beds. I said, it's not competitive at all. If the standard's high, it's because we don't want to let the side down. And it's that, really. It's community spirit, I think.
And that's what makes it very special.
Yes.
I'm sure that Sheila and the rest of the determined volunteers at Holehird will never let the side down. They're hooked by its stunning setting and the challenges of the terrain. This mountainous landscape meant Cumbria remained pretty inaccessible to all but the hardiest of travellers until the middle of the 19th century. All that changed when the railways began their march across northern England. The crags and scree are evident of what lies beneath. Seams of limestone dating back more than 300 million years crisscross the county. This raw material was perfect for building the railway viaducts, and the timeless nature of this stone transformed the fortunes of the area. But it had been exploited for hundreds of years. Robert White, Senior Historic Environment Officer, explains.
Limestone's very much the landscape of this area. Most of the field walls are made of limestone. Many of the farm buildings and houses are made of limestone. You can see limestone in the bed of the streams.
But resourceful Victorian engineers had much more ambitious plans for this useful construction material. Hewn out of this limestone are these mighty feats of engineering. The viaducts span the dales and gullies to create the Settle to Carlisle Railway and have become part of the landscape. The Victorian and Edwardian travelling public took it to their hearts as they thundered through the countryside. But the limestone didn't just provide building material. In a highly polished state, the stone was considered beautifully decorative and became known as Dent marble.
Limestone's the major rock of Dentdale, and some of the beds of limestone, when cut and polished, would look just like marble. They could take a shine. It was making things like mantelpieces, memorials, sometimes floors. It's very popular in the Victorian period, when Queen Victoria was in mourning for John Brown.
The buildings of the old marble works are now houses, but it's still clear why this landscape was so bountiful. There was unlimited limestone and a plentiful water supply for powering the marble cutters. Local farmhands would have made a few bob on the side by putting in hours as quarrymen and marble workers. One of the quarries was beneath this, the Dent Head Viaduct.
The railway had a double-edged effect on the industry. It was much easier to take the finished products away by railway, much easier than it would have been by horse and cart or pack horse. But it also meant that lighter material was imported into the area. True Italian marbles could come in. And it had another impact. Dent Head Viaduct is actually built on top of one of the major quarries. Constructing the railway over the quarry meant that the quarry had to cease production. The quarry owner was compensated, but a large part of the industry was no longer there.
The compensation may have gone some way towards softening the blow, but a new taste for imported Italian marble meant that Cumbrian dent marble fell out of fashion. It's peaceful here now, but the mighty viaducts are lasting monuments to those 19th century engineers and to the vital raw material that lay beneath. Just as scene-stealing is the topiary at Levens Hall. Designed to be picture perfect, it's captured the heart and soul of Len and seen him through good and bad times.
It's brought life back. It's like a rock. It has stability, like old England. And it's something that we should look after. I can't say any more, really.
I can't think of anyone better than artist Libby, who's been so inspired by Levens Hall to put some of these emotions onto canvas. The gardens have touched so many people, and it's high time to pay tribute. I think it calls for some celebratory Levens apple pie.
Well, look at this, nice little party. I think I should have some of this.
If you're good, you can have another piece like
Can I? Right, is this local then?
It's local. It's come all the way from just the other side of the hedge there, the apples anyway.
Oh, so it's Levens apples.
No, there are apples, yeah, I believe
let's see
so.
what Levens apples are like then.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Aye, it's not bad, you know. Right. You know, what surprises me is how delicate these little pieces are. I thought up in the north we had decent pieces.
We've not started on that one yet.
No, but...
Don't panic.
Well, I'm not doing, but today's all been about pieces, hasn't it? And
Aye.
not only pieces of pie, but pieces of gardens. What's come across is, for you, that this garden has framed elements of your life.
Indeed it has.
Some of them very spectacular, and some of them very sad.
Indeed.
And for Chris, you've also said about how you want to manage the garden as pictures, to encapsulate different images for people. And what we thought we'd like to do is ask Libby to encapsulate the magic of Levens.
Oh, look at that. That is fantastic, isn't it?
Absolutely lovely. What a great idea.
Libby, that's an inspiration. It's fantastic. Wild and fabulous.
Libby knows just how to capture the special magic of this enchanting garden. Her painting celebrates the hard work of all the gardeners and the pleasure the garden gives. It'll have pride of place in the tea shop as a fitting and lasting tribute. Here in Cumbria, I've seen how the landscape draws people in and stays in their heart. Artists and writers and gardeners have for centuries been captivated and inspired by this glorious land of lakes and mountains.